Hello everyone, it's Mr. Barden here. This video is going to be a little bit of a shorter one going over how we can input MIDI into Studio One. So the purpose of this video is to kind of introduce a little mini series I'm doing for the students in my sound design class where we are going to get the best sounding sounds we can get using just the bass synthesizers in Studio One. So with that being said, if you enjoy the content on the channel, you learn something in the video, definitely consider like, comment, subscribing, all the YouTube stuff. It does help out. So let's just right over here. So I've got Studio One 6 going. This is the full version, Studio One 6 Professional. Um, I just have it with the PreSonus subscription, whatever the Sphere, I think they call it. It's not a sponsored thing or anyways, but definitely consider checking it out because that's where you can get all of the content in Studio One and all of the effects and instruments included in that we're going to be talking about. So definitely check it out, but by no means do you need to have purchased this in order to learn something. You can do all of this in the free version of Studio One, and the concepts and general effects that I'm talking about will carry over into whatever DAW you're using. So let's just hop right back into Studio One. Today, I'm going to be focusing on different ways to enter in MIDI data. I'll be doing little shorter separate videos about the different processes in order to get what I think are really good sounding MIDI tracks. And we're just going to break those up into little separate videos. So the first thing you need to do is to make an instrument track. There's different ways to do this. If you can hit the T key on your keyboard, that's the built-in shortcut for adding a track, and you can select instrument, give it a name. It'll automatically save whatever the last one you did. So this will be manual data entry. You can choose how many of you want and any kind of settings, presets, all that stuff. Really, it's kind of a nice feature. So I'm just gonna hit OK, and it'll make the track right there. By default, it's not gonna do anything else. Just as a quick FYI, if for whatever reason you don't like or can't use the T key shortcut, you can hit the little plus arrow here. That'll open that up, and that's where you can see that's what the shortcut is there. You can go to track and add tracks as well, and you can specify just right from this menu if you want a specific one. And then you can name it whatever. So this will be manual entry, this will be all right, cool. So you can have all of that there. But again, nothing is going to happen by default until we choose the instruments to load. So if you want to hear anything, you need to have an instrument on your track. Now you can go ahead and start inputting the data without this, but I like to go ahead and stick something on there just so I can hear what's going on. So by default, the browse window pops up, so we can just hop right over into our instruments, and we're going to be looking specifically just at the ones that PreSonus has. You may have multiple instruments from different th- uh, you know, companies and things if you've bought them or added them in, or maybe found some free VST plugins online. So you may have different things here, but we're going to focus just on the basic PreSonus ones, just that way, regardless of what you may have on your computer, you will have these. So I'm just going to look in the PreSonus folder, and there's 5 main ones. Impact is for drums. Mai Tai is kind of a multi-phonic synth that can do a lot of stuff. I use Presence a lot for mimicking real-world instruments. Mojito is good for, leads and bass sounds and really things only just one note at a time is its key feature. And then Sample is used for loading in audio samples and pitching them up and down. Short version of all that, we're not going to be focusing on the synthesizers specifically right now. So for this one, I'm just going to load in Presence into one, and it pops up. It doesn't make sounds by default. You see, nothing's happening. So you just have to tell it what to do. So for this one, let's go with let's do a guitar sound. Why not? There's a bunch of options. You may have a variety of these depending on which version you have and what you have installed. Yeah, Les Paul, and we'll just do the full everything. And that's there now. It'll make some noises. You you may or may not hear these coming through. Let's see. It. Nah, it's going. We don't really care about the sounds anyways. Um, so that'll do that. We care about entering the notes. In a future video, we'll play the sounds. I'm just gonna drag and drop some stuff onto these just so they can make some noises. You may hear it just getting picked up by the microphone. So again, sound for this doesn't matter. I want to talk about the two main ways to enter in MIDI data. Now, if you have a MIDI file from some other program or something that you've made, you can just drag and drop that into your synthesizer, and it'll load up like normal. I'm just going to do a quick little search because I know I've got a MIDI file located here. And of course, my computer is taking forever to load. Yay. Well, while that's we're going to do other stuff. So I've labeled these tracks manual entry and controller entry. So for manual entry, for right here, you can click on your track and double click, and that'll make a little MIDI section that you can work in. If you double click on or you can click and move this blue bar around, that's the section where you can input MIDI data. You can make it longer or shorter, whatever you need. I'll make it 4 bars long. You can double click on this to open up the editor. And here we have a few different options. I'll make it really big to see. So first off, I want to point out it does the piano roll by default. And this will have the piano here on the side and the lower notes at the bottom, higher notes at the top. I want to point out that these red channels are important. So these are not notes that can be played. You'll see, it might be a little hard to see right here, but there's a little blue line indicating what the playable notes on your instrument are. They're right there, but these red ones change presets. So if you trigger that MIDI note, then all of the other sounds that you can make are going to sound differently. And you can play around with that, check them all out. They'll be different for each synthesizer. But just know that if it's red, that's not a pitch you can play. You can click on the keyboard to hear that note, which is very helpful. But you can also double click here, and each of these little bars is a note. You can change how it's broken up. So by default, it's showing me every 16th note here. And if I double click, it will put a note wherever I've double clicked, and it'll play the note there. What you can do is you can move your notes around as needed, and it'll play each note that you drag it to. So let's turn this into a chord. I'm not going to try to make any specific chord. I'm just lining them all up right there. So you have all the notes there. You can select multiple, make them longer. You'll see that they're adjusting up top as needed. Let's just see what this sounds like for my ears. All right. That's the chord. But that's what you can do. You can go in and edit all the things. If you want to adjust the velocity, which velocity makes the notes louder or softer, you can do that. But basically, this is what you can do, is go in and manually enter in the notes and hear all of the things going on there. It's a little time consuming, but it's very good for fine tuning all of your stuff. So you can adjust, again, the velocity, muting notes, changing scales, quantizing things. It's all right there. And that's pretty fun, pretty useful, but again, it's time consuming. I'm going to mute this and hop over into the other track. What I prefer to do is use a MIDI controller. And this is used for entering in notes. So this could be a keyboard, it could be drum pads, it could be some other form factor. All it'll do is it will send MIDI data to the computer, and it will input those notes. In order to have your devices be recognized, you need to first plug them into the computer. Some of them will get all the power they need just from the USB connection. I have a small one right in front of me that does that. I just have to plug it in with the USB-C to the computer. It gets the power. I have this bigger keyboard right here that needs its own special power adapter in addition to that. So just make sure that all of your stuff is plugged in and powered on before you do this. So from here, if you go, there's a few different ways we can go about doing this, but I find the quickest to get to this is from the main menu and just click right where it has your audio interface right there, and you can go to your external devices. So here under external devices, you will see, and you can also get to this from the top menu, all of the things you have right here. These are all of my MIDI devices. I have the Atom SQ, is that small one we looked at. A fader port is, get a bunch of faders I use for mixing and editing stuff. And then the big grand piano controller is what's over here. If you don't see it right here, you can go to add a new device. And right here, there's a whole bunch of presets. So it'll automatically work with a bunch of these. And if you say, so let's just say you happen to have a Frontier and it happens to be a transport or a Mackie control, you can go ahead and click that and it'll just add it all in. But if you don't see your particular controller here, because there's not everything here, you can go to add a new one. So maybe it's a new keyboard, a new instrument, or a new control circuit. It depends on what it is. Well, it's probably going to be a keyboard. You can hop over to here and you can give it a specific manufacturer, the keyboard name, fill all that in. But more specifically, you'll notice the receive from option right here. And if you click on that, you'll see all of the things connected that you can receive MIDI data from. So you'll just want to find your particular one and select that here. Now, technically, that's really all you need to do to get to input your MIDI data. You have the option to send MIDI information from the computer to another instrument or device. If you wanted to select that, you could. You could specify certain things you want to focus on and filter out. It depends on you, but the simplest thing is just to select, to receive data from this on all the channels and say, okay, I'm just going to close it out because I don't need to add a new one because all three of mine that I mainly use are here. But once you see it here on this list, you're going to receive data from it, and you can hop back into your session. Now, whenever you're doing that and you hit a MIDI note, you will see on the track you've selected this orange bar indicating MIDI something has happened. In my case, with this instrument, I have it. I can tell it to get data from the Atom, and it should. Oh no, this one does it. But you have ways to filter out different inputs and focusing on that. If we go to settings, you can specify certain things. Anyways, but once you have your instrument connected, you can do that. I thought we could specify what it was coming from. But it looks like any MIDI instrument will, by default, do that because it says the focus device is here, but I'm hitting the other one in front of me, even though this one's plugged in. So you can play around with that. Might be a little misleading. I'm not going to worry about it too much for right now. Once you've got it connected up to your MIDI device, you can record just like you would an audio track. So I'm just going to go back to 0 and set up to record. You can do a bunch of things. I recommend under your metronome settings utilizing that. If you click the little wrench at the bottom, it'll open up metronome setup. And you can specify what you want. I definitely recommend having it on there, maybe giving it a pre-count or a pre-roll. And basically it'll give you a few extra stuff. So I like to give myself 2 bars before we start. So what this will do is if I go back to 0, stop, and do that and get ready to record, it should pre-count all that. I'm just going to turn on my metronome, and if we record, it's counting down. It's going to start recording just like normal. But now, if I hit my notes, you can see that it is now recording these as I've entered in the data, and it's showing a lot of pressure as well, some aftertouch stuff happening right there, but it has recorded all of the MIDI notes I have entered in. And it kind of builds the section there. I can click on it, and it pulls it up right in the piano roll right there. So what I like to do is I like to record my MIDI performance, get all that stuff going. And then what you can do is go in, select your notes, and you can click on this cue to open the quantize menu, because you may not have your notes perfectly lined up. If you notice these two right over here, the bottom note is starting slightly after the top one. Maybe in this case, I wanted them both to start at the same time, but you can select these and you can quantize them. And what this is going to do is this is going to basically nudge them left and right based off of what you tell it to here. So in this case, to the grid, a 16th note resolution, so we can really specify where we want it to nudge it to the closest 16th note, the closest whole note, or so on, whether we want to have a swing or give it some tuplet divisions, any kind of velocity adjusting layer, all that stuff. But we hit apply, and it has now shifted all of these notes. And you can really clearly see it that now these two notes are starting at the same time. So I recommend checking it out, but then, or doing all that, doing the quantizing after you record it, but then double checking all of these notes to make sure they're still what you want, because sometimes the quantization doesn't always work how you might think it will or how you would want it to do. So just double check it, and then from there you can go in and, just like the manual entry, you can nudge your notes left and right to whatever you want, make them shorter, make them longer, adjust all the info. Depends on what you need to do, but you can do all of that manually. It is super useful. Okay. So, one thing I'll see if I can find. Yes. So that's the main ways to input MIDI data, through, again, controller or with just manually clicking and dragging. If you happen to have a MIDI file, which I think I have this one right here, I'm just double checking that that is indeed, yeah. If you happen to have a MIDI file from another thing, you could also just drag and drop it in. So I just happen to have this MIDI file right here, and it's there. So I'm just gonna quickly put sounds on them, and do all that. So you can, again, play through all of the stuff and just drag and drop it, and it'll play around and do different things, nice and simple. Or you can record yourself performing with a keyboard, or you can just manually enter it. You can play around with all of the options. I just want to point out one final thing that I didn't mention before. So I'm going to hop back up into my edit window, and I mentioned that by default the piano roll comes up. So you may or may not want this roll depending on what you're doing. It's very useful. You can, again, see clearly your pitches over time. It's all great. If you look over here, this is where you can select the view. There's the drum view, which shows you the impacts or the beginnings of the notes. If you're doing things with really short attacks, like in a drum sense, this is great for triggering your hits. It'll show you what notes you have right here. If I just wanted to drag and drop an impact in real quick, let me just hide this so I can see if I just drag and drop an impact, and then added that in there, it'll pop up by default, and you can see all your stuff like that as a drum. So again, pretty useful for that kind of view. There is also the score view, and if you click on that, it'll show it notated as music. This could be useful, could be less useful. It depends on the context of what you're doing. I essentially never use this in Studio One. I'll just tell you right now. But if you wanted to input notes, change that, change the rhythms. If you're used to using this, it's pretty useful. I use other notation softwares for this kind of thing. I don't really go about working with that very much here, but you could notate it all and print it out. Um, we'll see what that looks like because I've actually never done this. Yeah, cool, whatever. Gonna open it. Okay, a second. My computer's been really slow lately. It's been weird. I don't know exactly what's causing it all of a sudden. Um, you gonna do it? There it is. So when you do that, it'll show you all the stuff that's in the part. It'll fill it in with MIDI data, metadata, all that. It's pretty useful. I don't really have a reason to use it. That just did a little small section. Um, but anyways, it's just an option. I didn't want to not bring it up. So again, are the MIDI little editor views, so you can choose and pick and choose what you want. I definitely recommend exploring. There's a ton of tools you can work with here for again editing all of your stuff. I find in terms of getting the most amount of you know the most useful use of my time, I like to again record and perform whether it's on a drum pad or a keyboard or some other MIDI instrument. You can connect it up to your computer, quantize it, edit it. It does a whole bunch of useful tools. This is where I'm going to wrap it out. This actually went on for a little bit longer than I thought it would, but hopefully this is pretty much everything you might need to know for getting started with entering MIDI data into your DAW session. What I'm going to do in the future videos is talk about some audio effects that we can go about using in order to get the MIDI sounding a bit better than just the default sounds. Now, Studio One has some pretty good synthesizers. They do a great job at what they do, but they don't always sound natural. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. I find personally when I'm blending the two together, I like to add certain things pretty much every time in order to help my live sounds and my synthesizer sounds mesh a little bit more naturally. Um, you may find that useful, you may not. But I'm putting this out here as a resource for you all. So I'll show you how we can play around with the synthesizers and the effects in order to get some very, or as realistic as possible sounding sounds. This is where I'm going to end it today. So again, if you like the video, you learned something, definitely like, comment, subscribe, all the stuff. Again, I'm sorry I didn't have the sounds worked up, but the sounds are really irrelevant for this video. We're just talking about getting the notes into this DAW. Next time, we'll actually be listening to it and going about getting all of the sounds just right. So this is where I'm going to end it. I feel like I've said that 3 times now. I'll see y'all next time I see you. Bye.